There is no piece of literature that handles the problem of pain with more honesty and more realism than Job. It is, even amongst people who don't know God or don't like the Bible, it is a literary and theological masterpiece. It's a book about suffering and sovereignty. It's a book about providence and pain. It's about those intersections in life where misery and mercy collide, where grief and grace crash into each other, where catastrophe and compassion wreck. It's about how our darkest fears and deepest frustrations can lead to freedom like you never thought possible. It's about doubt and despair and our arrogant, natural propensity to make assumptions regarding who God is and what God does. It's about being a broken person living in a broken world with other broken people, but with a faithful God. That's what the book of Job is about. It's about the fact that life is hard and pain is real, but grace abounds. I want to begin by making a couple of comments regarding suffering, offering some definitions. Because when most of us think about suffering, we think of the deadly D's, death, disease, divorce, depression, the big stuff, crisis. And so because we may not be going through any of that right now, we may think, well, we're not in a season of suffering. Suffering hasn't come to our door recently, that we're sort of in the clear as of late. But suffering is much bigger and broader than the deadly D's. It's so much bigger and broader than crises, the big stuff. Everyday stuff like frustration and disappointment and anxiety and fear and insecurity and stress and my ongoing struggle with me, with others, with God, with my circumstances. All of that is suffering too. And when we understand suffering like that, then we have to admit that there has never been a day since we came into this world that has been suffering free. That we have suffered from the moment we came into this world, and we will suffer until the moment we leave it. We all suffer. Pain is unavoidable. And the way we often handle our suffering makes it worse. I had a friend once say to me that we never just suffer the thing we're suffering, we also suffer the way that we're suffering the thing we're suffering. In other words, we have a tendency to trouble our own troubles. And one of the ways we do this is when we have unrealistic expectations of life in this fallen world. Let me say this. Bad theology leads to false expectations. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to be prepared for the suffering that you face daily, you better have a robust theology of the fall. What do I mean? Well, we have to go all the way back to Genesis to know what I mean by that. Because in Genesis 1 through 3, the Bible tells us that God made everything good. And that we then broke every good thing God made. And as a result, this world and everyone in it is twisted out of shape. None of us and none of the things in this world are the way God originally intended them to be. We're all twisted out of shape. We're all out of sorts. We're all broken, fallen. And if you don't embrace that theology, you leave yourself with the inevitable pain of expecting things to be way different and better than they're ever going to be here and now. You expect things to be better. And when suffering comes knocking on your door, when pain comes knocking on your door, when hardship comes knocking on your door, you find yourself frustrated, like, well, this isn't supposed to be happening. Well, one way to guard against those unrealistic expectations is to believe in what the old theologians and philosophers refer to as original sin. The fact that everything around us and everything inside of us is in one way, shape, or form twisted. That it's not functioning harmoniously. There is a vandalism of shalom, both externally and internally. Have you ever felt like you couldn't share the details of a difficult situation without someone immediately offering a solution or some spiritual platitude? Have you ever responded that way yourself? The required cheerfulness that characterizes many of our churches has produced a suffocating environment of pat religious answers to the painful, complex questions that riddle the lives of hurting people. We hurt people who are hurting when we offer pat religious answers, overly simplistic religious pat answers to the complex issues of suffering and hurt and pain. One of the best things you can do, in fact, probably the best thing you can do, when you're dealing with someone who is struggling, who is suffering, who is hurting, do not try to solve their problem. And don't try to fix them. Don't try to give them some advice. Just weep with those who weep.